A Journey to the West, a story that I'm sure most people are familiar with, or at the very least, you know of something that has taken inspiration from this series of very old books. The anime industry especially was heavily influenced by A Journey to the West, like Inuyasha, which shares a bunch of similarities with the original story. Sun Wukong causes a bunch of trouble in heaven and is sealed under a mountain for 500 years. Inuyasha causes a bunch of trouble and is sealed to a tree for a long time until someone comes to help him. Both the monkey and the dog are controlled by a spell, Sun Wukong by the golden band on his head, and Inuyasha by the necklace that plunges him into the ground when Kagome tells him to sit.
Sit, boy!
Even the parties kind of line up. Obviously Inuyasha and Kagome are the stand-ins for Tripitaka and Sun Wukong, but Mirako also fits in with Pig, being kind of a pervert, and his hand is really, really hungry. Inuyasha also follows a lot of the same story beats, with every monster from coast to coast wanting to eat, marry, or kill Tripitaka, and then inevitably being saved by the monkey/dog boy. And there's no shortage of characters that are directly inspired by Sun Wukong, the most well-known of which is Son Goku from Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and so on, who again is directly inspired by the Monkey King. And he is only one of many. A Journey to the West has it's hit anime so hard, in a very good way. Well, really a lot more than just the anime industry, but you know what this channel's about. I'm gonna mostly focus on the anime side of things here. And since as far as I'm aware there is no direct Journey to the West anime, I'm not gonna have enough footage to make an entire team of Sun Wukong, Tripitaka, Sandy, and Pig, so instead, with the semi-recent release of Black Myth Wukong and my just buying it as of today, I wanted to take a quick break from building teams as I work on the Demon Slayer party, so instead, let's take a look at the Stone Monkey King, the Great Sage equal to Heaven, Sun Wukong. Sun has, well, a lot of powers, including, but not limited to, paralyzing people, firing lasers, turning into animals, turning into objects, turning into a giant kaiju version of himself, breathing underwater, being immune to fire, having enough strength to lift 2 mountains, but not 3, making barriers, 7 different types of immortality, being able to jump to the edge of the universe, and my favorite one, turning his hair into clones of himself with all of his abilities. And I am pretty sure I've missed a couple here and there. So yeah, with an arsenal of abilities like this, Sun was an issue within the universe that he came from, pissing off pretty much every god he could and fighting the entire army of heaven to a standstill alone. It got so bad that the Jade Emperor had to call in the Buddha himself to put Sun in his place, that being stuck under a mountain with a special seal on it to keep him there. And that's where Sun stayed for 500 years. But I'm not really here or able to give a breakdown of the entire story. That's not the kind of channel this is. This is a D&D channel at the end of the day. So what I'm going to do is really simple. Since I think Sun is way too powerful of a character to ever be put into D&D as anything other than an actual god, this is one of those times where 5e as a system can't accommodate a character. But what I can do is focus on one of the major aspects of his character, like let's say his clones and a few other major things, and turn that into something that lets you play a character like Sun Wukong. So that's what we're doing. Instead of building a character, we're building a subclass like the good old days, but in a slightly different way. Before I just kind of threw everything at you guys with numbers and mechanics, instead we're going to look at what we have from Sun. Pick a class and then try to replicate his abilities as best we can. I will also be using a lot of footage and other stuff from Black Myth Wukong because I bought it for this video. I'm loving the game. It's really fun. You should definitely go give it a try. It doesn't really follow the story of A Journey to the West though. It's more of an after thing. So we already kind of speed ran Sun Wukong's powers, but let's narrow things down so we can pick a base class to start with. Taking out his super strength, speed, and jumping, the standout abilities for Sun are his transformations, both into animals and objects, his ability to grow in size, and to create clones out of his hair. Sun got his transformation powers pretty early on in the story, all things considered, and he mostly uses it to turn into animals for sneaking into places, which outside of a transmutation wizard, you're really going to have a hard time finding anything that fits better for that than a druid. And druids can still use staves, which is what Sun uses. Oh, and he is vegetarian because monkey, which also fits well with a druid. I will say his constant transforming is a bit more like he casts Shape Change rather than using a wild shape feature, but that spell is just kind of a direct upgrade, and druids get Shape Change anyway, so it still works. But when it comes to the main power I really like about Sun, his clones, that's not something you can easily recreate in 5e, even in the new 2024 rules. So from here on out, we're going to be making our own subclass. And yes, there are a few things that could technically work, like mirror image or simulacrum, but those clones are either not real or take 8 hours to make. And if you look in the lore, or especially in Black Myth Wukong, which I'll be using for a lot of footage, the clones are made pretty much instantly. It just takes a few seconds at most. So I think for this subclass, we should make the clones the main part of it, the thing that all the other features in the subclass will kind of work off of. And for the name of this cloning feature, I'm going to take the name Pluck of Many from Black Myth Wukong, which, like I said, is going to be the main feature that we build off of for the rest of the subclass. So in Journey to the West and Black Myth Wukong, if you upgrade the spell enough, the clones have all of Sun's abilities except for his durability, which, to be fair, is kinda hard. Damn near nothing can really hurt this monkey outside of special fire and a poison that was able to hurt the Buddha himself. But I think taking a page out of the Echo Knight Fighter's book is going to do a lot for us here, where the clones have their own AC, but only one hit point to keep things balanced, since these clones are going to be kinda strong. And outside of the other stuff that I'm borrowing from Echo Knight Fighter, like your clone's ability to make opportunity attacks or letting you attack from their position, I want to make sure that your clones actually have all of your abilities. So I think having something that makes it so that whenever you cast a spell on yourself that has a range of self, it also targets the clones, so you can buff yourself and the clones at the same time. Also, I really like the idea of having your clones able to make a bonus action attack. You obviously can't do this the turn that you create them, but it will help you keep up with the damage of the other martial classes. Now there is one slight issue when you're making a melee druid who doesn't turn into animals. Your AC is going to be a little lacking, and unless you invest in it, you're probably not going to have very high strength. So let's tackle those next and get you ready to actually be on the front lines, smacking things next to the fighters. And for that, I'm going to look at the game again, which should give us an answer. Because do you see that? That right there is armor. And even in Journey to the West, Sun Wukong does wear small bits of armor on his knees, shoulders, and other areas. It's just not like the normal chest piece you might be used to. And thankfully, the 2024 Druid no longer has a restriction on wearing metal armor, which was an issue with the 2014 version. Now, I wouldn't consider this light armor. It's kinda bulky on his shoulder, so I think for the start of this next feature, we should simply make it so that you can wear medium armor, and as long as you aren't wearing a shield, you can also add your Wisdom modifier to your AC. Which could get a little high since you also get to add a +2 from your dex, so instead of your full Wisdom modifier, I'm going to say half of your Wisdom modifier. Mostly so you don't suddenly become an AC tank while also getting all the offensive features that this subclass is going to have. But I hardly think that getting some slightly beefed up medium armor is really enough for a full feature, so I think we do a little bit of buffing here, giving you a couple bonuses whenever you have one of your clones out. Well, technically I worded it as whenever you are within 30 feet of a clone, but your clone dies if it's more than 30 feet away from you, so same difference. So for these buffs, I'm thinking a few more things that will help keep you in the fight a little bit longer and actually be a good melee fighter, like adding your Wisdom modifier to your damage and certain saving throws, and a slight bump to your speed. But again, these buffs will only be active whenever you have one of your clones out, and they only have 1 HP, so they could get taken out pretty quickly. Now we also need to cover the circle spells for the subclass, and we actually have quite a few abilities from Sun that we can use to pick the spells. One standout spell is going to be Protection from Good and Evil, since Sun Wukong not only broke into heaven and wasn't able to be dealt with, but he also fought his way into the Palace of the Underworld and crossed his name out of the Ledger of Death so he couldn't die again. Alter Self is very in character, Death Ward because it's not like he doesn't have enough layers of immortality. Seriously, Sun has like 6 to 7 different types of immortality. One reason I really didn't want to try to make him as a full character. And yeah, all that is, that's all level 3. This might be a little bit, overtuned, but we'll see. So normally this is the part of the video where I make sure that all of you watching are subscribed, which I am doing. If you want to watch more homebrew or character builds, subscribe to the channel so I can continue to make them. But right now I have something much more important to go over. If any of you are a little older, and by that I mean somewhere around 30, there is a good chance that one of your favorite movies is something made by Studio Ghibli, like Spirited Away, Nazca and the Valley of the Wind, or my personal favorite, Howl's Moving Castle. And on their own, any of these could make an awesome D&D setting. But right now, I can do you one better. Who needs a moving castle when you can have an entire floating city with the Homie and the Dude's Wandering Tavern. Separated into 15 different levels ranging from stores, restaurants, hotels, bars, and even a black market if you aren't really keen on staying within the letter of the law. Inside this floating city you will find over 20 unique locations with some of their very own battle maps among the 15 provided, and even more plug-and-play NPCs for staff, patrons, and militia members, who are supposed to be protecting the city and keeping the peace, but might be a bit more interested in running their black market and raising the undead population. But don't let those pesky claw members get you down. Go on, enjoy the exotic food, find new magical items, and find yourself pulled into one of the many plot hooks just waiting for you to take the first step. Or if you would rather take your money and leave, you can always escape on one of the 6 airships with their own 5e stat blocks. It's all up to you. The Wandering Tavern could be its own separate campaign completely isolated to the floating tavern, or you could have it just be dropped into your campaign and be a location that your players sometimes visit. So yeah, if that wasn't enough to tell you, we have partnered with Homie and the Dude, the creator of Wandering Tavern, and some new stuff coming down the pipeline. And using my code GMG, you can get 10% off the purchase, which will include everything that I mentioned above, plus a bunch more, because I'm sure I forgot something. Again, the code GMG will get you a 10% off discount on your purchase, plus it lets them know that I sent you over, and who doesn't like free discounts, right? So, go check out Homie and the Dude's Wandering Tavern. You can find a link to that in the description below. So like I said at the start of this video, we are really focusing on Sun's ability to make clones and fight alongside them. And since we're making a melee druid after all, he's going to need extra attack at some point, which is easy enough to tack on to the level 6 feature at the end. But it's the meat of this feature that's going to be a little harder to come up with. In the books, Sun uses these clones to do a bunch of things. Pretend to be other people for him, stay locked up in his place while he scouts, or just take hits for him. He can also effectively make an entire army of clones. I think it's like over 50,000 clones at once if he ripped off most of his hair. And again, these all share his abilities, so imagine some Wukong, except there's 80,000 of him. No one is surviving that. So I think it makes sense to give the clones the same bonuses that you get for being around them. Mainly the extra damage to their attacks, and adding your wisdom modifier to their saving throws if they have to make any. Which at first seems useless. After all, if they only have 1 HP, it doesn't matter if they pass the saving throw on Fireball, half of Fireball will still kill them. And I think this is where I'm going to go back into the game for a minute and look at the Gray Hair upgrade for the Pluck of Many spell. This gives his clones even more HP, so they don't get taken out by a stray attack, even if they are a little bit more durable than that in-game. And I think making this boost to their HP equal to the amount of temp HP you get when you summon them is fair. It's not a lot of HP, but it's still enough to give them a couple hits, maybe. And given that you have 3 wild shapes at this point, and the ability to turn spell slots into wild shape uses, you really shouldn't be running out of clones. Now I know I've mentioned it a couple times at this point, but Sun can make a lot of clones. Even in the game, you start off with a base of 4. Well, I can't really do that here. Having a free ally pretty much every turn that can make their own attacks is already putting the action economy in shambles, just like the real one. But you know what? I'm sure it can handle a little more bullying, because one of the major upgrades for Pluck of Many in-game is called Multitudes, which just gives you more clones at the cost of a bunch more mana. And I really want to give you more clones, but I do have to calm it down a little bit from in-game where it gives you like 6, and again in lore where he can have an entire army. So for this, I'm thinking that when you use Wild Shape to make a clone, you can make a second clone, but only if you give up a Druid hit die or another use of Wild Shape. I added the hit die because even though you have a lot of Wild Shape uses and you can again turn spell slots into Wild Shape uses, Sun does still turn to animals quite a bit, usually small flying ones to escape from stuff if something actually does hurt him or if he needs to scout. So blowing them all in clones would be a little bit inconvenient. There's also a matter of Sun being able to heal from fatal injuries like decapitation, being filled with arrows, struck by lightning, put into a giant pot for a month and a half to try to melt the immortal stuff out of him, which didn't work by the way. And again, this is something I can't really add. And he's a druid, he's going to have healing spells anyway, but for this specific thing, I'm thinking that whenever one of his clones dies with their maximum of like 21 HP, he gets some temp HP back to make him a little bit bulkier, because after all, he is still rolling d8s for hit die. So far we have focused mostly on the clones. Actually pretty much entirely on the clones. Which to be fair, I said I was going to do, so that's fine. But there is one power that he uses that I really want to add, and I feel like I'd just be missing out if I didn't. Also, I'm not going to have any footage for this because I don't know if this is used in the game, and I also have not yet beaten Blacksmith Wukong. I'm on like the third area. Early on in Journey to the West, Sun Wukong used his transformation abilities to turn into a giant version of himself that scared a bunch of the other demon lords around him, as well as his own monkeys. And he's also used this form to fight a few other demons and gods throughout the story. Now obviously I can't make you the size of a mountain like Sun Wukong would like, but I think I can work with this idea. Again, not kaiju sized, but just big monkey sized, possibly with extra heads and arms if you need them. Now technically this is kind of one of Sun's many overlapping abilities, since it is just another transformation for him. So making it go off of wild shape is a given, but what bonuses do we give to this new super monkey form? Well, if we're going just based off of Journey to the West, and not another giant monkey form used by someone else with Sun on their name, then we make him big, give him some more temp HP to show that he has more meat on his bones, and my favorite part, since again, sometimes when he uses this he has 3 heads, I want to make him immune to being blinded or deafened, since I think that's kind of funny. There's also this upgrade to Pluck of Many from Blacksmith Wukong, making it so his clones can actually cast spells, which I think is really cool and very fitting. Since once again, and yes I know I sound like a broken record at this point, his clones have his same power set, but I don't think having each clone casting their own spells individually would be at all balanced. Look, this subclass is already teetering on the edge of broken I feel, so let's just rein this in a little bit. So instead of all the clones casting spells individually, I think letting you sack a couple more resources like another spell slot or even some druid hit die to have your clones cast the same spell as you is more than fair. But just remember, your clones already get any buff spells that you apply to yourself, so it's really no use doing this on those kind of spells. And I think if I give this any more buffs, I'm going to be jumping into the completely busted category for subclasses, and I typically don't like to go there. So instead of doing anything else, I think it's time that we name this subclass. And what better name than one of Sun Wukong's own titles, the Great Sage equal to Heaven. Although I'm probably just going to change it to Great Sage. Now if only the subclass that we just spent the better part of half an hour on was a thing. All these abilities sounds cool and all, but this also sounds like a ton of work to put together, and I'm just doing the pointy hat bit again, and I'm not sure how many times I can get away with that. I made it. You can grab it on my Patreon for $1, a singular buck. So yes, you can get this subclass, the Great Sage Druid, along with all of my team builds on my Patreon. Plus, from now on, all $3 and $5 tier members are able to vote on the polls for the upcoming team builds and homebrews. So if you want to play this for yourself or use the characters for NPCs, or you just want to support the channel, the best place to do that is on Patreon. And before I thank my patrons, I do want to once again shout out Homie and the Dude for reaching out to us for this partnership. The Ghibli-inspired Wandering Tavern looks amazing, and I am 100% dropping this into the game I'm working on for my own personal use. And remember, if you do want to buy the Wandering Tavern, you can get a 10% discount by using the code GMG. Also, using it will let them know that we sent you there. Okay, let's see, what else do I have here? We have Demon Slayer next week. I was just kind of dragging my feet on watching the Hashira training arc, but we are good to go now, and the next poll should be up as I'm talking right now, and the winner will be picked by the time Demon Slayer comes out. Okay, and now we get to the actual outro part. Thank you again to my testers for looking over and fixing my mess of a Sun Wukong inspired subclass that will no doubt break the action economy, and to my patrons who support this channel. You guys are awesome. And remember to vote on the polls if you want to have any say in what I make next. I think I'm also going to be doing monthly suggestion posts so I can know what teams you guys want me to make, so go on, join it, join us. But yeah, that is going to do it for now. I will see you all next time, and as always, have a wonderful day.